Genesis 3:1. Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, Has God indeed said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden? The Hebrew word for serpent is nakash, which appears 31 times in the Old Testament and is consistently translated as a snake, as in reptile. However, it symbolically represents the devil and his traits. Understanding this spiritual symbolism is crucial to grasp the full context and deeper meaning of every passage where the serpent appears. In the first 5 instances, Nakash refers to the devil in the Garden of Eden, speaking through the serpent. Genesis 3:2-3. And the woman said to the serpent, We may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. Eve's casual conversation with the serpent suggests she wasn't frightened or shocked by it, implying such interactions were perhaps normal for her. Serpents probably had the ability to speak. Genesis 3 verses 4-10. Then the serpent said to the woman, You will not surely die. For God knows that in the day you eat of it your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Next, the woman ate of it and gave some to her husband. Their eyes were opened, and they knew they were naked. They heard God walking in the garden, and they hid themselves from his presence. God called for them, and Adam replied, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself. Their eyes were opened to the harsh reality of good and evil, and it was far from pleasant. This knowledge wasn't a gift but a heavy burden. The first thing they became aware of was their nakedness, exposed and shameful. They felt judged by their appearance, their reproductive organs, and the parts used for waste elimination, all laid bare. The purity of their bodies was now tainted by sin, and what had once been innocent and good now felt shameful. Their eyes were opened both spiritually and physically. Upon disobeying God, their shame revealed their vulnerability and wretchedness. The divine spirit could no longer dwell within them. They were suddenly afraid of God, not just because of their physical nakedness, but because they were spiritually exposed. This fear wasn't simply about being without clothes. It was a spiritual nakedness, a profound sense of guilt and shame. Doubt crept in, and they no longer trusted God. Instead, they feared him, believing he might punish or even kill them. As he had warned them they would die. Notice that God had physical form, which cannot be symbolic. He literally walked to them, and if we take God's walking as symbolic, we must also interpret the fruit, trees, garden, and nakedness as mere symbols. If so, we tread on dangerous ground, since it would imply that much of the story is metaphorical. Genesis 3:11. And he said, Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you that you should not eat? This means both spiritual and physical nakedness. They were suddenly vulnerable to a force they didn't fully understand, something that made them feel uneasy, feeling weak, guilty, and spiritually bare. Genesis 3:12. Then the man said, The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate. Who does Adam blame? He blames God. He says, The woman you gave to be with me. Adam shifts most of the blame onto God, not really holding Eve accountable. She's portrayed as more of an intermediary, an innocent bystander or messenger. Adam understands that she isn't as responsible as he is. Genesis 3 verses 13 and 14. And the Lord God said to the woman, What is this you have done? The woman said, The serpent deceived me, and I ate. So the Lord God said to the serpent, Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle, and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. God seeks explanations first from the man and then from the woman, but he does not ask the serpent for an explanation. This is quite clear. The serpent's actions were predetermined, so God had no need to inquire about his deception of the woman. Interestingly, God does not address the serpent immediately. While it's uncertain if the serpent was present during this encounter, it seems likely, as God eventually speaks to him. God's judgment is pronounced in reverse order. Rather than starting with Adam, He begins with the serpent. The serpent is described as the most cunning of all the creatures. And similarly, the devil is portrayed as more deceitful and intelligent than any of God's creations. In the spiritual realm, beasts represent various types and ranks of demons and angels. The Bible frequently indicates that angels, both fallen and unfallen, often resemble various species, including humans. For instance, angels are compared to birds and other animals. In Revelation, we see various representations. The Bible depicts seraphim as serpents, while cherubim, considered a higher order, appear as an ox, eagle, lion, or human, as described around the throne. Many angels, like Gabriel, are portrayed in human form, and it is possible that Gabriel is a man. We don't have a clear description of what Michael looks like, but we do know that the devil is often depicted as a dragon or a flying serpent. While many scholars interpret these images as purely symbolic, I firmly believe that there is a specific reason God designed all creatures to possess distinct appearances, which goes beyond mere symbolism. In the Bible, elements can be both literal and symbolic, as well as physical and spiritual. God created humanity in His own image and likeness, which means we share similar attributes and characteristics, physically, mentally, and spiritually, with Him. For more on this, see my other video where I discuss the man creature. When God cursed both the angelic serpent and the literal one, they underwent significant transformations. The earthly serpent lost its limbs and its wings, the most beautiful of angelic beings and the most remarkable of earthly creatures. Satan exploited this highly intelligent animal to mislead the woman. God cursed a magnificent creature we never had the chance to know. I wonder if the serpent was originally man's best friend, just as the heavenly dragon serpent was once God's closest companion. The next mention of the serpent appears in Genesis 49:17, which occurs thousands of years later. God chooses this moment to reintroduce the devil in the form of a serpent. The verse states, "Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path, that bites the horse's heels so that its rider shall fall backward." This story contains a prophecy delivered by Jacob to all his sons, providing remarkable insights into the future of each of their descendants. I highly recommend reading this chapter, particularly the verses concerning the descendants of Judah. However, this specific verse pertains to the lineage of Dan, indicating that his tribe would ultimately engage in the devil's work, displaying characteristics akin to those of the devil. The imagery of biting the horse's heels closely parallels the serpent's action of biting the heel of Eve's offspring. Additionally, horses often symbolize significant figures in prophetic literature. In the book of Revelation, the tribe of Dan is notably absent from the lists of victorious tribes of Israel, suggesting they may have ceased to exist. While this could be symbolic, it warrants further exploration. What I didn't realize is that Jacob was a prophet, and this chapter serves as evidence of that. He received a vision. The next appearance of a serpent is in Exodus 4:3. In this passage, God speaks to Moses, who has doubts about convincing the Israelites and Egyptians that he is being led by God. God instructs him to throw his staff on the ground, and it turns into a serpent. Moses instinctively recoils, even fleeing from the creature. God then commands Moses to pick it up by the tail, and it transforms back into a rod. God explains that by demonstrating this sign, the Israelites will be convinced of his presence with Moses. Symbolically, this indicates that God, who created both the serpent and the devil, has the power to allow the devil to manifest at any moment. However, God assures Moses that he possesses the authority to have dominion over the devil. The serpent god Neheb-Kau was a significant figure in Egyptian mythology, and this serves as another example of God's dual demonstration. It highlights that the Egyptian god, representing the devil and resembling Satan, is ultimately subordinate to God and to Moses. This is a metaphorical double-edged sword for the Egyptians, as it not only shames their false god but also the devil himself. It further illustrates that the devil was cursed to the ground in Eden, and his power began to wane from the moment Eve was deceived. Interestingly, Neheb-Kau is often depicted with two legs like a man, contrasting with the serpent that lost its limbs in Eden. This representation suggests that Satan deceives by portraying to the Egyptians that he had some semblance of the power and vitality that God had permanently stripped away. The serpent received the first curse, followed by the cattle and beasts, and then the woman. Notably, Adam's curse was not imposed in quite the same manner, which we will discuss in a future video. All beasts were cursed and became part of a predator-prey dynamic. This reflects the natural order of sin, where innocent animals must rely solely on instinct for survival. The curse on animals would deepen further when God commands humans to eat them after the flood. Sin degrades all living creatures, progressively worsening until we reach our current state. We have been at the pinnacle of our physical degradation for centuries. The serpent is cursed to crawl on its belly and eat dust all its days. This is referring to both Satan and the snake. Before the curse, the serpent was not a ground-dwelling creature. It was likely able to speak, and perhaps some other creatures could as well. The serpent was able to walk and probably even fly. Now, however, it is cursed. A spiritual and symbolic curse corresponds to this physical punishment and is inflicted directly on Satan. Now the devil is symbolically cursed to crawl on its belly and eat dust. What does this signify in a spiritual sense? Dust often represents the wilderness and impurity, Sheol, suggesting a state of being unclean and dead. But what does it mean for the devil to metaphorically eat dust? Additionally, the act of crawling on his belly raises questions about what the belly symbolizes, an area worthy of further study, though it would be more appropriate to cover all of this in the next video. There is much more to uncover about the serpent and the dragon that has often gone unnoticed. You'll be amazed by the symbolism surrounding them and how it relates to apocalyptic prophecies and the end times.